The truth about Liberia. We educate, elevate, and promote all things Liberia. We conduct interviews, panel discussions, debates, and more. Tune in to Focus on Liberia on Facebook and YouTube and be a part of the stories that make up the news.
This is Focus on Liberia, and I am Dennis Ja.
And I am Ansony Sieh in this Sunday edition of the Hour of Politics. In this edition, I have George Preston Lobbo as my guest to discuss the topic, Joseph Boakai-Unity Party's arrest plan for Liberia explained. Welcome to the broadcast. I will in no time welcome my guest for today's edition of the Hour of Politics. He's no one else but George Preston Lobbo, Vice Chair or Chairman for Operations, Unity Party, USA and Canada. George, it's good to have you. This is home, but we have to handle business. Welcome.
Mr. Sieh, I want to say thank you very much. It's a pleasure joining you this morning, and let me take this time to also extend my greetings to all Liberians from both back home and all over the globe who are tuning this beautiful Sunday to listen as we articulate our AREST plan. What does it have to offer for the country, and what does it mean for Liberia? How are we intending to use that to be able to expand the economy and create jobs for our people so that we can begin the process of lifting our people out of poverty? Focus on Liberia, like you said, is nowhere strange to me. It is almost like home to me. But I'm very, very glad to be here this morning to speak to the conscientized mind of our people and provide the information and clarification that is needed to be able to have the understanding that when we go to the ballot boxes come 2023, you cannot say you didn't know, you never heard details about it. Today, I'm here to provide those clarification and provide those details on that plan.
And George, that is so much needed. More so when nowadays our politics is like clouded with the noise and we don't focus on the issues. We don't talk about the plans of the candidates because they are all hopefuls or aspirants for now. It's good that we talk about the plan, and we are glad that you have agreed to sit with Focus on Liberia to explain AREST, which is the Boakai-Unity Party's plan that is known right now. So let us get to it in no time. George, what is AREST, and what does that mean for the candidacy of Vice President Joseph Boakai?
Mr. Sieh, I want to say thank you very much. AREST, we first began, as you know, a couple of years back, or about a couple of months. It's been over 12 months to be exact, so we can say a year and a half ago.
Right.
The former vice president stated during one of his address to the nation, he said that given Liberia's current economic conditions, that for him, that his entire vision of expanding and growing the Liberian economy to create jobs, he said he summed it up in 4-letter words at first, which were ART, ARTS, which basically was focusing on agriculture, on roads, tourism, and sanitation. But you see, that is what speaks to the conscience of our standard bearer and our political leader. Understanding that indeed, if we are going to invest in agriculture, we spoke about these plans, Mr. Sieh. We then saw the need that these jobs or these areas we'll be investing in must be supported by Liberian labor, must be supported by Liberian workforce. But we also understand the tremendous amount of skill deficit and poor labor force that we have in Liberia. So Ambassador Boakai, being this smart leader who understands that education remains a fundamental part of anything we want to do. Because if we're going to train people, if we're going to give people the skills, if we're going to create jobs for people, they must have the ability to do the job. So we went back into our war room and said there was a need to fit in education. And that is where the E comes in. Because the education part of this plan is what provides the training, the enhancement, the skill development, all the different things that is needed to make you a fruitful employee. So that is why our plan now is AREST. It did not change from the beginning. But as we continue to move along, Mr. Sieh, we must not forget, given the level of destruction that George Weah is doing to the country, and given the damage that we will meet, Mr. Sieh, we cannot say this is going to be one fit all problem. There might be things we're promising to say now, given the enormous problems we will meet. We might say, you know what is our priority now? So it was good that we included education as a key part of our plan. So that means we look at agriculture, roads, education, tourism, and sanitation. There are other things that are important to us, but again, we can't just say we'll do all. But that is how we'll sum up our vision for transforming the country.
Thank you. And George, is AREST now, as we speak, the official Boakai-Unity Party's plan for Liberia? Is that correct?
AREST is Joseph Numa Boakai's vision in transforming the Liberian economy and moving Liberia's forward.
Okay, so this is Joseph Boakai's vision for Liberia. So talking about that, I may ask, or I want to ask, how far is Team Boakai now in rolling out this plan to the Liberian people officially?
Mr. Sieh, you know, we are now going to go to an election without presenting to the Liberian people a plan that is written for public perusal.
Okay.
What I can say to you, as our team finalizes, is working on our plans with regards to details, we also have to be cognizant. We don't want to overestimate or understate the problem we will be inheriting. So while it is true the plans are in the workings, but it is also important that we begin to articulate some of the details of our plan and how it will be implemented. And that is what we are doing now, while the plan is being worked on to be finalized, which we will present to the Liberian people, Mr. Sieh.
All right. I got it clear. So this plan is being worked on, and you are now ready to roll it out to the Liberian people. Are there possibilities for the plans to be omitted? All right, into omitted, right? Sorry. Are there possibilities for you to omit the plan?
Mr. Sieh, again, let me say this. Ambassador Boakai understands the country. That is the good thing about his experience. It is always possible. A plan can always be amendment, there can always be changes, there can always be upgrade based on recommendation and the prevailing circumstances of which the country will be facing. There can always be things that we can all add to them.
Okay, so how did AREST come about, and who are the drivers of AREST? You know, how did the idea come about?
Mr. Sieh, as far as I'm concerned, if I was to sit here today to list for you or catalog Ambassador Boakai's team or different teams, I think it would need another show. Okay. I can say to you, for example, let me just state here, Ambassador Boakai has a team that many Liberians do not hear of a lot. All right? And they are called the Patriots.
Okay.
Have you heard of the Patriots?
I heard that there's a group called Patriot, but I don't know any member.
Okay, great. On the Patriots team, for example, Dr. Robert Sherman was the most respected African in the state of Arizona, was an economic professor at the Grand Canyon University, University of Phoenix, and taught at Arizona State University. He's the one who heads the Ambassador Boakai policy and economic team on the Patriots. Just so you know.
And members of Patriots, do you know for a fact if they have contributed or contributing to the crafting of this AREST plan?
That is why I'm telling you, Mr. Sieh, Ambassador Boakai has multiple skilled, trained, educated, experienced, smart Liberians in his arsenal that are working on different aspects of Ambassador Boakai's vision for transforming Liberia. And that is how we leave it. We can't come to say, this is our group we're getting in Shanghai, this is the team we have in Dubai. No, what I'm telling you is the Liberian people can be assured that once the Unity Party-led government of Ambassador Boakai takes power today, We have a vision, we have a plan, we have an agenda to execute upon. We are not coming to be guessing. That is what the Liberian people want.
Is there a timetable in terms of releasing the plan to the Liberian people or not yet?
Mr. Sieh, again, let me say this election is in October. And as far as we are concerned, there have been campaign dates scheduled by the National Elections Commission. I think the Liberian people will be demanding our plan for them to be able to peruse them. So we definitely will make that available. That is all. That is the only commitment I can give to the Liberian people today. I'm not going to put myself in a situation and give a time frame here today, which will be misleading to the people. But I can assure our Liberian people that indeed we do have a plan. That is the most important thing. The most important thing, we have a plan and we have a vision. And we are ready to execute from day one. That is the most important thing the Liberian people want.
The only thing is you have a plan. I'm glad that you are working on it. But Liberian people are hungry. Unlike Team Boakai, still working on their plan. I know Tier 1 has one out there that I read. And so that's what I'm asking. But I think I will take that answer that you are working on it. So may I ask the question now? Was there any research done, surveys done that inform all the elements of arrest?
Again, Mr. Sieh, listen, I think the question itself is very important, but I find it fascinating. Ambassador Boakai have served in government. So he has traveled the entire length and breadth of the country.
Okay.
He has served in different capacities. He has seen towns and villages. He has met Liberians all over the country. So again, when it comes to Liberia's problem, you don't need survey. You don't need to send a team out to do any investigation. For example, Mr. Sieh, like a guy like me.
George, do you really believe what you're saying, that there's no need?
Let me say this to you. Yes, let me say, I know what I'm saying. Mr. Sieh, when we know that less that anywhere on a 650,000 Liberians are gone on a poverty line, when we know that we're spending $200 million on the rice market, when we know that there's a need to invest in agriculture to feed ourselves because we are importing at a higher rate, those are the facts are there. When we know that many of our young people don't have jobs, Mr. Sieh, we don't need research about that. When we understand that anywhere the age range between 14 to 25 years old, over 65% of them have not completed junior high school, Mr. Sieh, the dossiers are available for us. So obviously, yes, this is what drove AREST. So again, I will say this to you, Mr. Sieh. We know exactly what the deployable conditions are. We know what the conditions are to get from Ganta to Grand Junior County, especially Zreju. We know that our country lacks infrastructure. So again, Mr. Sieh, our plan is clear, is concise, and is straight to the core of the problems Liberians are facing.
And the crafters of this Boakai's vision called AREST, do they have any history of crafting any national plans for Liberia at any time, or any national plan anywhere, or any major plans anywhere, any of them on that team?
Mr. Sieh, again, I will not speculate. Okay. It is obvious every president will have advisors in the office of the president. The good thing about it, we do have different ministries and agencies in government that are responsible for specific reasons, and they have tasks to perform. For example, before the Ministry of Planning joined with the Ministry of Finance, the Ministry of Planning was really the one that would focus on providing data, collecting data, so that national economic policies agenda would have been crafted through the Ministry of Planning. Again, now we have the Ministry of Finance, Development and Planning. Ambassador Boakai has told you that he's intending to consolidate ministries. So again, I will tell you, yes, indeed, any smart president, it is obvious you must always have policies, advisors, you must have a team around you that are always going to be prepared to be able to respond to situation as the need arises. And I can assure the Liberian people that, yes, he will do such a thing.
And out of curiosity here, George, why are certain letters representing certain sectors not in AREST? For example, in AREST, we have A for agriculture, we have arrow for roads, and on and on. What we don't have is, for example, George, we don't have E. I mean, we have the E there, but it's for education. It's not for the economy. Am I correct? We don't have T. for technology. And you know, George, you live here in the U.S. Technology rules the world right now. I don't see security. I don't see J for justice. So the question, I don't see D for diplomacy. I don't see reconciliation. Is there a way that these other sectors or elements of governance tie into this arrest, or arrest, the 5 letters, the 5 sectors are the only ones that are part of the Boakai's vision for Liberia?
Mr. Sieh, that would be disingenuous to make such a conclusion.
I'm just asking you a serious question.
I'm saying the analysis, the basis for the analysis will be flawed, Mr. Sieh.
Okay.
Let me say this to you. Every government that comes to power will highlight its area of priority, given the urgency of the problem she's inheriting.
Okay.
Mr. Sieh, we know very well that if we are going to expand the Liberian economy, Mr. Sieh, agriculture itself is a source of economic viability. That in itself addresses our economic condition. Mr. Sieh, tourism. If we're talking about investing in tourism, for example, those are economic activity. There are countries today around the world that are benefiting immensely from tourism, that their economies are striving based on just tourism alone. We are not just looking at tourism alone. We are looking at roads. The constructions of roads improves the economy. It enhances the people's ability to move goods and services to and fro. It promotes economic activity. Mr. Sieh, every single letter that we've highlighted, if we were to take those letters and begin to expand on them, Mr. Sieh, again, it addresses the entire problem facing the country. Let me say this, Mr. Sieh. Let's look at agriculture. Let's just take agriculture. If we decided the way Ambassador Boakai intends to invest in agriculture on a massive level, we want to reduce our inputs on rice. We want to be able to invest in the agriculture sector because we believe, Mr. Sieh, that in the agriculture sector, we are going to be able to create jobs that are not of high skill.
George, I don't mean to cut you off. We have a special segment for agriculture.
Yeah, but guess what? Guess what? Guess what? What agriculture does? If we are able to be self-sufficient, to feed ourselves, we say, for example, we cannot go to Grenada and say, look, we want Grenada to invest in cocoa production. If there is not a relationship, one that is being fostered. So, Mr. Sieh, reconciliation itself, it ties into everything we intend to do. Because look, if we expand the rules, that people can travel from one county to go see things and do sightseeing, like we want to invest in the tourism sector. People can come from Grand Gila to go to Grand Cape Mount to Tala. Mr. Sieh, I'm telling you, it will be easier for us to enhance our reconciliation agenda, but we must take the basic steps. What we don't want to do, and let me end on this note. You know, Madam Sieh in 2005 stated so much, and Liberians were as much as she did. Today, continue to say nothing was done. We've learned. So we want to be sure. We want to take our time. We don't want to overpromise and underdevelop. It's better to honor promise and over deliver. And that is what we are going to do for the Liberian people.
George, thank you. I think the way you put it, it makes logical sense that if the roads are built and the people are able to interact, if there are jobs and, somebody from Nimba is in Grand Crew and working, maybe, and then when you bring in reconciliation, it was kind of, make it possible. I think it makes logical sense. But what I want to also see is the elephant in the room is always corruption, right, Josh? Which undermines almost everything. Even this vision can be undermined, just like all of visions and plans in the past have been undermined by the devil in the room, corruption. So I was looking for a letter in his vision to fight corruption because it's key. So how does corruption fit in AREST here? That's the question.
So the very first thing about AREST that's so beautiful when it comes to corruption is, Mr. Sieh, for you to fight corruption, you must have a proven record of not being corrupt.
Okay.
It don't matter what type of corruption plans you craft. If you at the top is corrupt, those plans will die. You will not act. And thank God for Liberia. We've been opportune. We are fortunate to have the finest public servant, a man who has been tested, who served 25 years in public service with zero proven allegations of corruption. That means it tells us that we now will have a leader who will not be afraid to hold people accountable because he has done it. He has not been corrupt. But Mr. Sieh, let me tell you why we don't need to put a letter in for corruption. Okay. Our Senate Bearer, Ambassador Boakai, has been very clear. In 2017, he was the only political leader who said he wants to move Liberia from this dependency on aid. So, Mr. Sieh, you can't move a country depending on aid if you do not believe in your ability to generate revenue, protect your revenue, and hold people accountable. Ambassador Boakai was very clear. He said that fiscal discipline will be the center of his governance structure. And this is why Ambassador Boakai has committed in part of his 100 days action plan to ensure that the outgoing government is fully audited so that we know what we inherited. But he has been very, very clear on the record that when it comes to corruption, Mr. Sieh, he has said, and let me quote him for this. He said, throughout my life, I have learned to take what belonged to me and leave what belonged to the public. He has also stated that $1 taken from the people is $1 taken from education, is $1 taken from development. And as a result of that, he will not have no room for corruption. So, Mr. Sieh, we cannot invest in agriculture. We cannot invest in road if we are not fiscal discipline. If we have people looting the covers of government, where will we get funding from? Where do we intend to take money from to support these plans? We have to ensure that we protect the little we have, and that is why he has stated that he strongly believes that Liberia's revenue has been understated, and that is why we must correct it come 2024 as soon as he assumes the mentors of power.
Thank you. I heard from you earlier that AREST constitute Joseph Jiman Boakai 5 major priorities, all right, for governance, I know, as a vision for Liberia. The question here is, of the 5, which one is priority number 1? In other words, if you were to arrange them, all right, based on priority, which one would be first and why?
Mr. Sieh, there's a reason why we have AREST. Mm-hmm. They all are intertwined. If we are going to invest in agriculture, we want to make sure that the vast majority of those who will be working should be Liberians. Okay. We cannot have them working if we don't educate or train them. Mm-hmm. We cannot have them working if they don't have the skills. Okay. It is important. And as they are working as well, Mr. Sieh, making sure that they can get to work on time, that the conditions for vehicles to be able to take them from point A to point B are accessible, that means roads are important. So we're not going to sit there and say, we are going to look at roads. No, we can't do that. We are going to focus on all of them. And that is why we've been very clear in how we crafted it, in showing that as we address this, this is for this reason. Mr. Sieh, as we open up the country, what you can ask us is, at what pace? That will be determined based on the circumstances at the time we get to power. But at least the Liberian people will know where our focus will be. And that is what I will say to you, because we can't overpromise. We won't know how much of it. Look, Mr. Sieh, when you listen to what is happening now, you can tell some of the damage that has been done. Like, for example, the Liberian water and sewer. If you do an assessment right now, or have massively, these guys are looting that area, the destruction that will meet there will determine the level of focus that it will be necessary to apply to Liberia water and sewer, because our people will say need water. If we're talking about sanitation, our people will be able to, they need running water. So these things are important. So I will not sit there and say, we're just going to look at sanitation and we put, no, everything is intertwined, because Mr. Sieh, if we're going to train and educate our workforce, we also want to ensure that they are in a clean environment. Because Mr. Sieh, if we invest in sanitation from the initial stage, and our people, we have less people getting sick and going to hospitals, there's also a saving from that investment. The money that we take to be bringing in medical supply, we can now begin to use that money again to expand our economy, whether that in the tourism sector. So everything is important to us. We're not going to put one ahead of any one of them. But those are our areas of focus.
And George, this is a major question here. Now you have AREST. AREST cannot be implemented without the funding. And I will ask the question, George, what is the rough estimate of AREST? And have you identified the sources for funding for AREST?
Mr. Sieh, what we will not do again, let me say this. We want to be very honest and transparent with the Liberian people.
Okay.
We will not set false expectation. I recall after the spring meeting in 2019, the World Bank and the IMF told the current CDC government, there were a few recommendations made. One of those recommendations were go back to Monrovia and set a realistic budget. A realistic budget is one that takes a look at the government own core revenue, the government own ability to
then make your rough estimate.
So, Mr. Sieh, again, Mr. Sieh, based on the time we get to power, Ambassador Boakai will begin to say with his different teams and say, gentlemen, this is what I want done. So, Mr. Sieh, let me give you a scenario here.
Are you suggesting that you're not going to give her a rough estimate in terms of
Mr. Sieh, I can. You want me to tell you, say, AREST will cost 10 billion? Mr. Sieh, we know that we need over $2 billion to construct roads throughout the entire Liberia. Based on an assessment that was done during the days of Amara Kone as finance minister and G. Goodimo as public works minister. We have those plans. So I will say this to you, Mr. Sieh, what we want to do is to be very clear with our people.
But the second half of the question was how will we identify the sources?
Oh, Mr. Sieh, let me give you.
Okay.
We strongly believe that our revenue have been understated. So we've also identified other sources of revenue.
Okay.
Mr. Sieh, we strongly believe that if we tighten the screw, if we close loopholes, if we enhance fiscal accountability, and we enhance fiscal discipline, Mr. Sieh, we know that Liberia has the ability to generate anywhere between $400 to over $800 million on its own, on our own. And let me tell you some sources of funding.
Just by closing loopholes and be fiscally disciplined.
Discipline, yes. And listen now, and holding people accountable.
Okay.
Because don't forget, Mr. Sieh, there are a lot of people who are actually not paying taxes. That are cutting
for George, that might not be enough. You have to look in other areas.
Mr. Sieh, listen, we have concession agreements that are ongoing that are stayed there. We have different other deals. But let me tell you some other areas we intend to look at as well, Mr. Sieh. Okay. For example, I've not heard government speaking more about property taxes. We own properties in Liberia. People pay property tax anywhere in the world. That is also another source of revenue.
You sure that will be possible?
Oh, Mr. Sieh, once you put the right system in place, that is why, Mr. Sieh, having a system will help us. Okay. For example, if we ensure, let's just take a community of rehab and say every single house in rehab will have a number and will be registered, and there is a property tax, even if it's $5 a month. Imagine if that method is applied across the entire country.
George,
that is also another source of revenue.
Is this just like your own suggestion, or that was part of the discussion?
Mr. Sieh, you asked me a question. These are all different revenue streams I'm providing for you. Okay. So at the end of the day, I'm only letting you know that there are opportunities out there that we can tap into that we have not taken advantage of. Okay. Again, Mr. Sieh, for example, do you know that at the Freeport, we strongly believe that what has been reported is not factual. It's not factual.
Is it understated?
You say what?
Is it understated?
It is understated. It is understated. And we strongly believe that if we put the right people in place and we put the right system in place and we are holding people accountable, Mr. Sieh, we strongly believe that that number will increase.
And what informs your conclusion that revenue is being understated in Liberia?
Mr. Sieh, is very, very simple. We don't have to go far. Let's just follow up with what has been happening with the CDC government officials as they articulate their poor performances. Let's take, for example, Liberia Water and Sewer. You have someone who is a controller and a deputy managing director called us and told us that they went to Club Beer and Club Beer owed the government money. But what they do is when they go to these businesses, they gave them undercut. So the actual amount is not being reported. So instead of saying we'll pay the 10,000, You rather settle with the million and sign and say, gee, yeah, 2,000 for your year, your go. So now what does that mean? The government is short 8,000, but few people in the government got $2,000. So those type of things we intend to get rid of so that the actual 10,000 can be reported.
Thank you so very much. And folks, if you are just joining us, this is the Hour of Politics, a focus on Liberia. My guest is George Preston Lobbo, and we are discussing Joseph Boakai's vision for Liberia called AREST. That is the plan that is going to arrest the situation in Liberia, if I can put it that way. We're going to take a short break right now. When we return, we'll be talking about the 5 pillars, if I can pull it that way, of AREST.
Are we going to be breaking them down now?
We will be breaking them down now. That's what I want us to take a break for you to catch your breath, and then we can go into them one by one. So we'll talk agriculture, we'll talk roads, we'll talk education, we'll talk sanitation, we'll talk tourism, and that we're doing. So George, be as brief as possible so that we can get to all the sector today. A short break, we'll be right back. Don't go anywhere, folks.
At Focus on Liberia, we discuss everything Liberia, from education to politics, arts and culture, entertainment, agriculture, history, religion, family, and technology. Focus on Liberia uncovers and showcases the best of Liberia and shows the world the truth about Liberia. We educate, elevate, and promote all things Liberia. We conduct interviews, panel discussions, debates, and more. Tune in to Focus on Liberia on Facebook and YouTube and be a part of the stories that make up the news.
This is Focus on Liberia, and I am Dennis Jah.
And I am Ansony Sieh, and this is Focus on Liberia. We are back with you in continuation of this discussion on Joseph Boakai's vision for Liberia called AREST. Josh, let's get to agriculture yet very quick. Joseph Boakai has had the privilege to serve at FPMC, something highly related to agriculture, and also Minister of Agriculture. So I would think this place is so dear to him. So George, I will be requesting some numbers as well, because that is key. The first question here is, why is agriculture so important to Joe? What does he think and see that agriculture is going to do for our country?
Mr. Sieh, first and foremost, let me say this to you. Ambassador Boakai have told you that he went to school hungry many times.
Mm-hmm.
A boy coming from Foya, or Wesonga to be exact, in Lobbo County. He understands what it means. Recently, Mr. Sieh, there was a report out that Liberians are too hungry to go to school. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And not only that, recently, the issue of rice shortage in the country, Mr. Sieh, created this huge, long queue of people across the country. Prices skyrocketing. Our people, it created a panic in the country. Mr. Sieh, any nation, for you to move forward, to be independent, truly independent, you must have the ability to feed yourself. We've survived on handouts, on importation. It is time that we, as a country, we have the fertile soil that we can grow food. There are countries that are self-sufficient that do not have the soil that we have. So for him, he strongly believes that if we invest in agriculture, and we can grow food that we are able to feed ourselves, and we can begin to send some of those food outside, whether we can export some, that is also a source of revenue for our country, because that brings in foreign currency, that brings in foreign capital. And Mr. Sieh, we're spending $200 million right now on rice importation alone. If we cut that down, but let's just say half in the first 2 years, that means that's $100 million savings. You know very well that the government is providing subsidies to importers to keep the price of rice down. What is wrong if we take those subsidies and invest it into local farmers in Liberia to enhance their capacity, give them the modernized tools they need to produce at the highest rate, so that we can be able to say This is where we'll keep rice price down and bring the cost of rice down for our people. And we encourage our people to consume what we produce, and let's produce what we consume. I mean, there will always be some people who will have preferences. The market will always be open. But again, at least we want to say that, Mr. Sieh, we have to begin to feed our people. Our people go to school hungry.
I can agree.
It has to change. And that is why agriculture is important. Agriculture is not only about rice. I want to make this point before I leave on this. Most of the time when we speak in terms of agriculture, many Liberians only focus on rice. There are other things, there are other produce that are in the agriculture sector. There's nothing wrong with Liberia. We used to export cocoa and coffee back in the days. We still have vast land that we can invest in. Mr. Sieh, the reason for investing in agriculture, through agriculture, if we change and invest in the productive sector as well, through the agriculture, that means when I say the productive sector, for example, let's say we invest in a massive potato farm. Let's say we take account of the bombing that we want to invest in potatoes. And we say in Africa, Liberia wants to begin to produce potato chips. We can build a plant there. Even if we create a job for 5,000-10,000 Liberians, that is our vision for the agriculture sector. It's not just only rice. But we want to use the agriculture sector and also invest in the productive sector of the agriculture sector.
Thank you. And Josh, you know, we have 5 sectors. I want us to get to all of them. So maybe your answers are brief because I have a lot of questions here. And in Liberia, I think I read somewhere about this Maputo declaration or something that I think Liberia signed up to that protocol requesting about 10% of more of the nation's budget be spent on agriculture. The current administration has not been able to spend up to that amount. This is my question. How much will the Boakai's administration spend? Well, what percentage of the budget you think going to be allotted for agriculture?
Mr. Sieh, one thing I would tell you, coming from Ambassador Boakai's perspective with his experience, if Ambassador Boakai, who is serving government, understands that when a country commits itself to international treaties or agreements, then it must abide by those agreements. And therefore, whatever commitment we make as a government, it is our responsibility as a country to fulfill our commitments. Now, what I will say to you, though, if the agreement states that we must spend 10% of our national budget on the agriculture sector, it is up to us as a government to see the need at that particular point in time. We can say, is 10% of our budget enough to be able to create the type of jobs we want to create in the agriculture sector? Maybe 10% might not be enough. Maybe for the first 1-2 years, we might say we want to go 15-20%. At that time, Mr. Sieh, again, I don't want to sit there and give you numbers blindly. I'm a guy who believes in the raw data at the particular point in time based on the assessment that will be done, given what will be left and what will be inherited. Then we can be able to say, gentlemen, this is what will be going. This is how much will be allocated. But absolutely, every commitment we've made as a country, I think one thing the Unity Party government has shown in the past is that we have been, that is why we were highly recognized on the international stage. Our ability to uphold our international commitments and abide by those fundamental agreements we signed was something that we demonstrated. That is why we were able to qualify through the HIPIC initiative on all of that. And in the agriculture sector, we will fulfill our commitment on that, Mr. Sieh.
Thank you. I don't know if the crafter have done their research to know at what percentages we are right now as a country in terms of export for agricultural produce and production. Now, if you know the percentages, do you have targeted percentages to increase export and production? And do you have these estimates captured in your plan?
Those are things that no government, nobody will come up of right now. For example, you don't need to say, well, what data do we have? Do you know of any factory in Liberia that is producing at a massive level? We stay importing $200 million worth of rice in the country. So again, Mr. Sieh, we've seen our national agriculture budget, all right? The current agriculture minister was indicted by the government LACC for corruption, as a matter of fact. So we know about that. So again, Mr. Sieh, we don't want to get ahead of ourselves here. There's no snake that runs more than his own head. What the Liberian people wanted to know from us and from Ambassador Boakai is that, does he have a plan? Is he ready to execute? Can he execute? And what is his plan? And that is what we are here to talk about today. I will say this to you. We're not going to sit down and give numbers here and there, Mr. Sieh, because the very first thing you know very well, there's nothing going on in terms of the productive sector. Let us not sit there and speculate on that. That is why I continue to say, Mr. Sieh, there will be an overall assessment done. When Ambassador, after election, there's a reason why there's a transitional period. The transitional period is where turnover notes are communicated between departments or between the outgoing administration and the incoming administration. At that particular point in time, we'll be able to see. Because let me give you an example, Mr. Sieh.
But George, may I come in here? So are you saying that we don't have accurate numbers in Liberia in terms of production, in terms of export? So it is difficult for you to say, well, for example, our export now is at maybe 10%. So the Boakai plan will increase it to 50%. Is it because we don't have those numbers? So you
no,
can come up with
Mr. Sieh, so let me say this to you. For us, what I came here to do is to discuss AREST. In AREST, we intend to invest in the agriculture sector. And through the agriculture sector, how we intend to invest in it, I have just articulated that for you.
And you did that. I was just trying to say, well, it is right here. This is where it is.
So
and
let
we're
me
going to
finish,
move
Mr.
it this
Sieh,
way.
again. You asked the question, let me answer.
Go ahead.
Let me answer. What I came to do today is to state for you what is AREST, how AREST will impact the lives of the people, how will AREST create jobs. Again, Mr. Sieh, like you said, if you have the data, that's fine. I will say this. We know the CDC government is notorious for cooking up data. As a result of that, this is a government who we've seen data in the past that told us the economy was projected to grow at 4%. It was later reversed to grow at negative 1.9%. I am not following off of that. Having said that, but let me say this. One thing I do know is that the prices of basic commodities has gone up, and I know that the price of rice has increased. And I know that Liberia imports over $200 million on rice annually. Those are our areas of focus. How can we decrease that number? And what other sectors through the agriculture sector in terms of productivity that we can invest in? That is what I'm here to do today.
So then, George, what are the specific planning, training, and preparatory works that will be initiated in year one or the first year to get the agricultural sector started?
Again, Mr. Sieh, when a government comes to power, I find it to be interesting. Mr. Sieh, we've told you what our 100 days action plan will be. I think Ambassador Boakai have articulated that. That is not me to state for the records. Having said that, what we are here to do today, again, Mr. Sieh,
the only 100-day plan that I'm aware of is that in 100 days, there will not be any cash.
Mr. Sieh, are you asking the question and allowing me to answer or what? So let me answer.
Go ahead.
Great. Thank you for that. So again, let me say this to you. We've articulated our vision. A president has a 6-year term. We understand our people are without jobs. We know the price of basic commodities on the Liberian market. We know the price of rice on the market. We know that
the question I asked, just to remind you, because
you can't tell me how to answer the question for you. You can't. That is not you. You can't tell me how to answer the question for you.
I'm saying,
Mr. Sieh, you can ask any question you want. Let me answer the question. It is my job to answer the question. It is not whether it fit your narrative, whether it suit your question.
That's not what I'm doing.
Mr. Sieh, my job is to answer the question. And you ask the question and I answer the question. It's not to be interrupted when I'm speaking.
Go ahead.
I listen to you ask the question and let me answer the question. Whether it meets your expectation, it satisfies your desire or not, that is left for the Liberian people to decide that. And I think what you should do, just let me answer the question, not interrupting me consistently. And so let me speak again. Mr. Sieh, we've said to you that we know in the agriculture sector, we can create jobs and expand our economy. And yes, indeed, we can. Because through the productive sector, if we invest in factories, in production centers across the country, I use a brilliant example here. For example, if Liberia was to decide that we invest in a potato, let's say planting, for example, we can invest $15 million in planting, in 3 tuber crops, cassava, banana, and planting. Mr. Sieh, in 2 years' time, you can be able to generate anywhere between $10 to $15 million in terms of revenue from that investment. Now, let's say from the banana farm, we decide that we want to process this banana. We want to add value to it so that it can be exported, whether it's going to be used to make baby food. We want to build a plant to create jobs. So when we talk about the productive sector, Mr. Sieh, it will be based on the need at the time, based on what we invest in and what we feel feasible. Because whatever we invest in, there will be other risk assessment analysis conducted. There will be other SWOT analysis. Let's say, for example, we had a plan to come into power and invest in potato chip factory. But then we realized that we do not have a comparative advantage in potatoes production. We can change. We can say, you know what? We could have invested in potato and create 20,000 jobs, but we're going to change.
I will not interrupting you, right?
Let me answer the question, and that is what I will say to it. So to answer your question, I repeat, Mr. Sieh, where we are, these are the hardcore numbers that we have. Liberia is spending $200 million on rice importation. We import over 87% of everything we consume at home. And as a result of that, we want to stop that. We want to slow that down. We want to take back some of that money and start spending it in Liberia to increase domestic production in Liberia. If it's going to mean providing small loans for farmers, adding additional farmers, working with them to build their capacity to increase their production at home so that we decrease our importation, that is our area of focus.
And George, that's what I was trying to do. I was trying to remind you of my question, right? What I said was, what are the specific planning, training, and preparatory works that you will put into place to jumpstart the agriculture sector? That was my question. I just wanted to restate the question for you.
Go ahead, people.
No, I've done it.
Okay, so again, Mr. Sieh, that is why when you ask us about education, right? And you say why education came in. Mr. Sieh, when you do an assessment of the overall problems, then, for example, let's say we went to the Ministry of Agriculture and we realized that, yeah, right now we're in the 21st century. We know that technology has to be part of every single thing we're going to do moving forward, even in the agriculture sector. So yes, indeed, you might not see a letter that says technology, but we know that to enhance farmers' ability to make them competitive, we need to invest into technology. We need to invest into power. Electricity is going to be key. So, Mr. Sieh, that is why education came in. We already invested in other skill training centers back in the days during the UP time. Sadly for us, this government has not been able to keep it that up. For example, some of the initial investments we made in community colleges. Mr. Sieh, you heard the former vice president the last time say that he wants to turn BWI into an IT college, for example, right? Where people can go there to get skills more in IT work, in technology, because he knows very well that in this 21st century. So, Mr. Sieh, to answer your question in that area, these are the different programs. And on the education side, let me tell you what he has done. He has already secured 9 MOUs with the Arizona State University here in Arizona, with the University of Arizona, to provide logistic, technical support to university students in Liberia. So those are things he intends to expand on. So he already has that out here where people will be, he has a program in place where ASU will be able to accommodate Liberian professors for some time and they can return to help educate others. So he has that MOU, he has those plans in mind already.
So talking about agriculture, earlier you said it's a sector that will help in a big way with job creation. You understand? And I agree. So talking about agriculture, is there an estimated amount of jobs that you think capture in your plan to be created from the agriculture sector alone, or you're going to say you don't want to call numbers too?
No, Mr. Sieh, those are things that the details will focus on. Because, for example, let's just since we want the conversation to be based on be hypothetical about it. Let me just give you a scenario. Let's assume we said if we invested $10 million in cassava in Grand Cape Mall, from the $10 million, we can create 5,000 jobs. But we come to power and see the need and say, you know what? Based on where we are, we can't invest $10 million. We can invest $5 million. So what happened? Did we lie? So then Liberians come back and say, oh, but they said they were going to create 10,000 jobs here. We invest in this. So, Mr. Sieh, it is going to be based on the assessment when the president take over. All we can tell you is when we talk about the
you are saying he should take over before you do the assessment?
Mr. Sieh, we've done our own assessment in terms of the areas we are going to focus on. So again, when I say in terms of the assessment, it is going to be based on how much resources will be allocated to a particular sector at that particular point in time. Because job creation, if you projected to invest 20 million, for example, and you came to power, and based on the enormities of the problems you inherit, let's say the government was so corrupt, you owe 8 months salary, and you say, I can't invest 20 million now, I can only invest 2 million. So that is what I'm trying to say to you.
Of your Josh, this arrest is not setting targets. Because we are looking for specifics here. You're not setting targets. You're not telling us we hope to create at least this amount of jobs in the agricultural sector. You don't want to do that.
Mr. Sieh, here's what we're trying to say to you. We have been very clear. We know that if we make investment in the agriculture sector, we will create jobs for our people. What we are not going to do is to give our numbers just for the sake of giving our numbers. Because the circumstances at the prevailing time, depending on resources, will depict how much we will invest. But one thing we do know, everywhere in the world, agriculture sector is a serious area for job growth and job creation. Example, for a country like Liberia that has a proven history and has a data of importing 200 million, Mr. Sieh, when you think about this number, we are spending 200 million on rice importation alone. If we cut that down by half, that is a saving of 100 million. Mr. Sieh, since you want me to just give you our numbers, let's say we cut it down by 100 million and we took $100 million and went to Cocopa, for example. Cocopa is a government-owned rubber plantation in Nimba County that lies between Flompa and Kanwi. And we went there as a government and said, you know what? We want to invest in a productive sector. We want Cocopa to begin to produce rubber materials here. Rubber materials that can be used in our country, whether it's bowls, whether it's trash cans, for example. And we've invested 20 million with the goal to create 15 or 10,000 jobs. So those are things we can do. So again, Mr. Sieh, I don't want to just be talking across the floor about this.
And George, when you say investment, how are you going to invest the money? The government as the institution directly doing the work, or what? Through businesses, how are you going to do the carry out the investment?
Mr. Sieh, listen.
And have you identified,
Mr. Sieh, again, this is what I'm saying to you.
The investment channels?
Mr. Sieh, don't put it. You can't put the cat before the house. Because let me say this to you, Mr. Sieh. Right now, where Liberia is, consumers' confidence in the financial sector is at its lowest. All right? Which we know. Liberia runs a cash-based economy. Less than 7% of the country's population have bank accounts, right? Mr. Sieh, Liberia has had history in the past of taking loans from government and not paying. Recently, we've heard about LBDR. The U.S. ambassador even spoke on that issue. So, Mr. Sieh, there are different programs we can use to invest in creating a private sector. There are PPE programs we can use. We can use small microloan financing through listen, Cocopa already exists. There are different range of programs.
And George, you are saying, cool, this is a plan. You have not identified specifically what you are doing.
Nowhere in the world you're going to get up. Joe Biden, when Barack came to power, he didn't tell the American people that when I come to power, I would take $1 million and give it to GM. That's not how it works, Mr. Sieh.
No, I'm not telling you.
No, but that's what you say
this
we should
amount
do.
will be given
Did
to
Barack
this.
tell the American people that once I become president, I will go and get GM this much money? He didn't do that.
That's
when
not what
he came to power and he saw that there were job losses and there was a need, Andrew, I'm coming. Based on that, based on the recommendations of Brian Bernanke, then Barack Obama decided that it was important to build out Wall Street. He didn't tell the American people. No, so you can't sit there and ask me that we should tell you this. It don't work like that, Mr. Sieh.
Okay.
That's not how it works.
And
George, I'm not even finished. Joe Biden, for example, you heard him throughout talking about we need to get the economy going. We need to get our people back going again. When he came to power, what did he do? He brought the bill back better. Nobody's going to run for president and say, as soon as I get to power, this is where I'm going to go. I'm going to spend. You know, that's not, no one does that, Mr. Sieh. So these questions you're asking, that's not how it works. So Barack came to power and he saw the challenges the American economy was facing. And he was advised by his team that it was important to build our GM. But it was important. Let me finish, sir. Since you live in America and you're a homeowner, there is a reason why the government built out Wall Street and invested and created the HARP program, the Home Affordable Refinance Program. Because you know what? He was advised that many people were losing their homes, that many homes were underwater. Did you hear Barack talking about how when he was running for president before 2008? That's not how it's done. So again, the most important thing that Americans have heard and Liberians have heard, what we want to do, what we are going to do, where we are going to be focused on, the things that are important to us, how we want to lift them out of poverty. That is what they want. And that is what we are here to talk about.
The Biden plan had identified what it would do, with whom they would do it, who would benefit, and how it would be done. You are right. They didn't say we'll give the amount to these people. All right. But they identified like the home assistance program you're talking about. They identified the threshold. People in the income category, this will be made available for them to benefit. And that's the question I'm asking. But let me ask the question, Josh, if you don't mind here. The rice shortage thing is a big thing. I'm glad that you are good on the numbers when it comes to rice importation, the amount being spent on subsidies and the amount being spent on a yearly basis for rice importation. How does AREST come in to arrest these rice shortages that we always having in Liberia?
Mr. Sieh, I think you just asked the question again. I think you just brought it back to the starting of the conversation. That is why I just told you.
Just be brief then.
So hold on, Mr. Sieh. That is why I stated to you that, Mr. Sieh, our country has been heavily dependent on rice inputs. Again, we are back to the conversation that we started. We are spending $200 million as a country on rice importation. If the Joseph Boakai plan, his investment in agriculture, will be able to cut our inputs on rice from $200 million to $100 million. You asked, and I stated for you. Ambassador Boakai stated the other day, he said what he intends to do is to use the subsidies that is being given to the importers, give it to local farmers for them to increase production. So again, Mr. Sieh, if we are able to make the initial investments and we can reduce that by $100 million, and we took $100 million as a country, even just invested, let's say $50 million in a county like Lofa, Nima, and Bon to just produce rice, Mr. Sieh, we can increase domestic productivity. The issue of prices, it has to do with supply and demand. When demand is high and supply is low, Mr. Sieh, that is a very simple economic equation anyway. For 11 rate is there.
Thank you.
You know what happens. The price will always go up. So again, what we want to do as a government is to ensure that our government can invest in the agriculture sector so that we increase domestic productivity.
Thank you.
That is why I stated that through that increasing of domestic productivity, we are going to create jobs in the agriculture sector. And I stated that from the initial stage. And just going back to the similar question.
Thank you, George. Let's talk about the arrow representing Rose. GMB has been on this subject of roads. What I want to know is when we talk about roads is just part of transportation and it's just, a portion of transportation as a whole. So taking the entire transportation into account, we have air, we have sea, and we have lands, and lands also includes railroads, right? So which roads JMB talking about here when he talk about roads?
Again, Mr. Sieh, Liberia as a country has a serious road challenge. Infrastructure as a whole, not just roads. But Mr. Sieh, what we are talking about in terms of roads, you stated other means of transportation, which is true. But we are talking about accessible, good roads that people can use. In our country, many Liberians do not travel by air. We've now started investing in railroads. So obviously the roads we are talking about is the pavements that we have. Okay. So we are talking about good accessible pavement across the country so that we can enhance the movement of goods and services. We want to open farms to market roads. We want to open corridors that will be able to increase, again, it ties into our plan and our vision. Mr. Sieh, if we are going to make investments in the agriculture sector, for example, we can put $30 million to invest in agriculture in Lofa, and then we can get the produce to Monrovia. What will happen if the road cut and the cars can't get from Lofa to move the rice to where it is needed? When demand is high and we need to move rice from Lofa to the warehouse or to the distribution center in other parts of the country, we need roads. So when the former vice president speaks of roads right now, Mr. Sieh, let's look at what we have as a country. Is people's ability to move from point A to point B. How we open up the entire country. That is our area of focus so that we can also enhance our agriculture activities. That is our goal.
So in AREST on roads, have you identified how many miles of roads that you intend to build within 6 years? George, there's a reason I've tried to do this, right? In life, you must have a target. And young men come in or you say, well, by the age I will get my BSc, at the age I want to get my master. It's okay it's like you are afraid of failure, and that is not good in my opinion. I don't want to debate you. So my question is, did AREST identify or has AREST identified how many miles of road that will be built in 6 years?
Mr. Sieh, the former ruling party, the Unity Party government, is the only government that has managed to pave over 650 kilometers of roads. Again, our goal was to continue down that path. What we have said, Mr. Sieh, is we want to get the country open. Now, we will not be able to say here is a number specifically, but our goal, Mr. Sieh, if we can pave all the major corridors throughout Liberia, that is Ambassador Boakai-Unyity's goal and his promise. That is why he has made it very clear. He has committed himself that in his first 100 days, that he will ensure that there will be no car stuck in any mud around the country, especially those major corridors. That is to tell you, Mr. Sieh, our goal is not just to ensure that cars do not get stuck, but our goal is to ensure that those roads are paved and they are in good conditions, that it will be for future generations. That will be our focus. If we can pave all the roads, if it's up to me, Mr. Sieh, I want every single road paved in Liberia. That is what I would wish.
And George, how can GMB can say boldly that in 100 days, no car will get stuck in the mud? And this plan is not able to tell the Liberian people that at least will be maybe 500 kilometers of road or 500 miles of road. You can't say it. You don't have a target at all.
Mr. Sieh, when the UP government came into power in 2006, we didn't tell the Liberian people we were going to pave 200 kilometers of road. We told the Liberian people that we're going to focus on infrastructure development. We're going to build roads. And throughout 12 years, we paved 650 kilometers of road. President Weah promised the Liberian people that he was going to do better than we did. We paved over 650 kilometers of roads. It has been over 5 years. He's yet to pave 40 kilometers anyway. We're not going down that path. But let me say this again. With our plan, Mr. Sieh, we know we cannot invest in tourism if the country is not accessible. We have beautiful beaches. We know that Harper, for example, is one beautiful place that tourists should go. So we know that from Buchanan to get to Maryland, using that other corridor to Riverside, Sino, is a serious problem. And if we want to, those are things we have to focus on. So again, Mr. Sieh, I'm not going to sit there and say we'll pave 200 kilometers of road, but our goal, and Ambassador Boakai-Unyity's plan, is to ensure that all major roads in the country are paved. If he has the opportunity and have all the resources, that is what we wish to do.
And George, the plan is saying all major roads. Have those major roads be identified? How many Liberians know which roads are major roads given the geography?
But it's simple. We can go for it then, Mr. Sieh. It's very simple. One of the major corridors is the Southeastern corridor. For right now, one thing the UP government has done that was very good. Now that we have the Bangam and the Common Road under construction ongoing, so we can take that out of the way. So getting the Lofa should be better. So now what should be our focus? Our focus now will have to be between Ganta to Zwedru, River G, Maryland on that side, and the corridor from Buchanan to pass through Riverside to go to Sano on that side. And once we can do that, another corridor that I think will be very important is to be able to get from Bomi to Lofa through using the Douala corridor. That's another road that needs to be focused on. From Douala straight into Lofa. So when we say major corridors, those are areas we can look at on the map for right now and say, yeah,
and George, the plan could just identify them, right? So these are the major roads.
Mr. Sieh, we just told you asked Mr. Sieh.
So the way you stated that, is that capture?
Mr. Sieh, we just told you again, we are working on the details of the plan, and you bring us back. Mr. Sieh, you can't keep going to this to yourself, man.
So George, let's talk about breaches, because you can't talk roads and talk breaches, right? Did AREST talk about what breaches, where they are to be constructed as you carry on this whole road construction work?
Mr. Sieh, you know that you can't construct road without breaches.
That's why I asked the question.
So we can't separate to say we'll say breaches. I mean, if we want to construct road, breaches definitely will be part of that. So we know that most of our bridges are crumbling. Some of them, since they were constructed years and years ago, they need to be upgraded. Some of them need to be changed. And the UP government did a very good job on some of those bridges. Mr. Sieh, our expectation, especially as those of us from the Unity Party, was to see the CDC government come and build upon what we started and where we left off. Sadly for us, the reverse goes. So what we are going to do again, Mr. Sieh, in as much as we are committed to ensuring that roads will be part of our agenda, you can rest assured that we are heavily going to be focused on those type of things. Absolutely.
There are major areas that we need bridges, if you are to enhance.
I'm not an engineer. I will not sit there and speculate or lie.
For example, the part of Liberia connecting with Africa through Butuo, we need a bridge there so that trade between Liberia and
Let me give you another one that I think we need a bridge on. I think we need a bridge between Foya and Gegedu. So across there should be a bridge, and there should be a bridge between the Grand Cape Mount to go to Freetown. That crossing point. I think we should do away with ferries because, Mr. Sieh, in 1994,
we certainly should do away with ferry. And to add to what you're saying, that is why Joseph Boakai, as experienced as he is, we have to identify certain places to build bridges so that Liberian will know that, yes, this man has a real deal, but I'm not seeing it in AREST or that in the works too.
Mr. Sieh, if Ambassador Boakai believes that he's going to produce, he's going to invest in the agriculture sector, one who has stated that he wants to be able to export some of those agricultural produce, I think it's smart enough for anyone to know that if we are going to produce in Liberia to the point where we want to export, we have to be also able to make the necessary investment that will facilitate the exportation of our produce outside of Liberia. So, Mr. Sieh, absolutely, we don't have to sit there today and say, oh, we're going to have to do this. But, Mr. Sieh, it is simple. It should be part of us. We know that if we're going to produce, for example, let's say we produce rice to the point that we've slowed down rice input and we're producing at a higher level where we now have the ability to keep rice price under $10 a bag, and we do have excess that we want to export. Mr. Sieh, don't you think we need to, as a government, if there's a need to say maybe we can finance a construction of a bridge so that agricultural produce from Lofa enters Guinea can be feasible, and can be accessible. So those are things we have to.
And vice versa.
We don't want to
right?
get people talking over our head. Let's take care of our people first. We're not going to just be projecting. Let's address the fundamental problem at home first, Mr. Sieh. That's why we want to be.
You are still addressing the problem because here's the thing. Maryland County, for example, I lived there before, right? And I crossed the Kavala to get to the Ivory Coast side. So many people in Ivory Coast, in Maryland, get rice and other essentials from across the Kavala. So if you have a bridge there, it enhances the economy of what you call Maryland County. What you're doing there is there will be self-sufficiency in terms of food availability in Maryland County, because what they may not be able to get in Liberia, they can get it across. So it's tied into the economy and all that. And I think you guys should look.
And Mr. Sieh, let me say this. Mr. Sieh, hold on. Mr. Sieh, I think some of your, let me just say this to fuel your audience. Some of the statements being made here using other countries is an example. When I stated just now, I said, for example, if we produce rice in excess where we have more, and we want to export rice. I didn't say we'll export rice to Guinea. Mr. Sieh, you see, when you're asking some of these questions, because there are people who are heavily focused on twisting the full context in which I spoke to please their false narrative about Ambassador Boakai's plan. That is why I have tried to walk a thin line, because people now get ahead of themselves. I didn't say we're coming to export rice to Guinea. So I was using a scenario.
George, I don't want you to debate the audience. Let them have their say and let the Liberian people be the judge. George, we have to move to education because of time. My question here is, what would be the overall goal and focus of the educational component of AREST? What would be the primary and overall goal for the educational component of AREST?
Mr. Sieh, to be honest with you, here's what I would just quote the former vice president himself.
Okay.
One of the things he has stated is that you recall the other day he said in an interview, he said, when we came to power, I told Madam Salif, let us invest in a program that will at least provide a brush up or a freshen up for many of our college or high school graduates, because he felt that many of them were not up to the level of this 21st century. One of the core of our educational agenda, something he has spoken about, is that, for example, Mr. Sieh, let's go to primary education, which we believe is going to have to be where we started from, because the foundation is going to be key as we move our country forward. One thing Ambassador Boakai has identified, he said the other day, he said, for example, he said, you go to a town, there are 5 houses, right? They got one school with one teacher. Another town 10 minutes away has another school with one teacher, with 6 houses. He said one thing he wants to do is to be able to bring those villages together. So meaning, here's how that's going to work. Now, people will say, you take one village from one area to this place. If there were 5 houses there, 10 houses here, what is wrong with our government investing in low-income housing projects across the country? And he said he wants to be able to build a centralized school system. So let's say, Mr. Sieh, if there were 5 towns with 5 houses, right, and at 25 houses, what is wrong if we were to construct a new community with, let's say, 40 houses? Because there's a possibility people might move there. With new school, the school that has a library, a teacher's quarter, everything, a recreation center, so that way it is easier for those children to just go to class. And that way we don't run a situation, Mr. Sieh, where when one teacher gets sick, the whole school have to shut down because the children can go to school again. So now we have teachers who live on that compound, who are there to teach, and that in those 5 villages were now turned into one low settlement, and now in modern houses, low-income housing projects. Those are the things he intends to focus on. But overall, Mr. Sieh, the former vice president is key about adding value and quality to our educational sector. He has been very, very clear that he believes that given where we are right now as a country, that there is a serious skill deficit. And for us to compete, there needs to be a revisit of our overall curriculum. There needs to be a plan in action. That is where you have crafters. That is why we have a ministry called the Ministry of Agriculture. And Mr. Sieh, That is when the president-elect sits with his Minister of Agriculture. I don't know if they have an educational advisory board, but to say this is what I want, this is what I want done, and the Minister of Agriculture will execute based on the president's educational vision. And
Mr.
that is
Lobbo.
what we want to do. But we want to add value, improve the area. He talks about sanitation, for example. He said the other day that he believes that some of the conditions under which our brothers and sisters are going to school, Mr. Sieh, he feels that they are bad and they are not conducive for our people to go to class. So
George,
that those are things we want to improve on.
Mr. Lobbo, so in education we have primary. We also have another secondary. We have another major sector is the technical area, and then you go to the tertiary education, right? So which area in education will be AREST focus, and why would that area be AREST focus?
Mr. Sieh, AREST did not state that we intend to just focus on one area. Let me finish now, Mr. Sieh. I just told you again for the records. We intend to place key emphasis on primary education. I also told you during our earlier conversation that we intend to invest in some of those community colleges. I even quoted the former vice president as stating that he wants to turn BWI into an IT college. So all those areas are key for us. Mr. Sieh, the reason why, let me say this, Liberia situation is not as unique as other countries. We are inheriting a serious problem. And so we can't just say we ignore the other side, because again, while it is true we want to place emphasis on primary education, like I said, which is the foundation, but we also have to understand that the primary education is key, but we also need to help those who are up there, because the jobs we will create in those different sectors, they have to fill those jobs.
Thank you.
So we can't just ignore any one area. All are important, and we'll place serious and key emphasis on all of them. And that's what I'm saying to you. But we want to focus on primary education because the foundation is key.
Thank you. And two questions here. One, in the last 40 years, George, I don't know if you noticed, we as a country have not built high school. I repeat, in the last 40 years, Liberia as a country.
In the last, what, 40 or 4?
40 years. Liberia as a country is yet to build another high school. I may be wrong, but that is what I'm sticking to. And then the whole issue of WAEC, or WAS that they call it now. What is Boakai plan on this AREST vision for the construction of more high school? Do we need more high school now? And this WAS thing that is ongoing, is Boakai going to continue it? Is he going to replace it with something else? What he's going to do about it?
So I want to agree with you, Mr. Sieh, when you say we've not built no high school.
And I may be wrong, so you go ahead.
No, during the UP government, we renovated some schools, but there were new high schools constructed. You know, as a result of the war, there were many counties, there were many areas where schools were burned down. Some of those schools that were being hosted, that hosted displaced people, for whatever reason, they were destroyed. For example, let me go to Ganta, where I come from, the JWPSA. What the Unity Party government did was they expanded it. So they built additional new annexes to expand that area. Or some areas where there was a need to build new ones, there was school built. So that is not, you can check on that. But let me say this to you. The question of why is Mr. Sieh, AREST focuses on education. I think it will be up to the Minister of Agriculture. That is why there's a Ministry of Education. It will be up to the Minister of Education. The Minister of Education with his team will be able to evaluate what should be Ambassador Boakai's decision moving forward. Don't forget, WAEC as a whole was a commitment made by many West African states. So that has other implications on the diplomatic level as well. If it's something you want to pull out of, those determinations will have to be made. I'm not going to sit there and speculate on that. But again, Mr. Sieh, I took WIAC, I passed WIAC, I took WIAC at Convent, and as far as I'm concerned, it used to be, from what I heard and from what I know, it was a standard that many people who went to high school had to meet in order to graduate or to say you pass. So if somewhere the country, Liberia, decide that it has its own mechanism, it has its own program, it has its own standard of evaluating its students, that it does not need to participate in the WIRE program, then that decision will be made based on the recommendations and the arguments made or presented to the president. That is not something I should sit there and speculate about. But as far as we are concerned, we will invest in the schools. We will ensure that our students are adequately prepared. We'll make sure that teachers are paid. We'll make sure that the materials are provided for our people so that students can be well prepared to take WIRE. If there's a decision made to pull out, then we'll pull out at that time.
Thank you, George. We have 2 more sectors. And for the 2 sectors, I have about 15 questions. So be brief as possible. And we have 30 minutes to go here. The question here is on sanitation. What are the elements of AREST sanitation component? And in your definition, Team Boakai, what is sanitation?
Mr. Sieh, you know, I'm not a sanitation expert.
But your plan should define it.
Hold on now, Mr. Sieh. When we look at sanitation, let's just look at the country as a whole in terms of pollution, the filth around our country, our ability to dispose of waste. Those are sanitation issues. You saw our international partners when they stated our country was dirty. And so a lot of times when we speak in terms of sanitation in our country, it's our ability to dispose of waste and keeping our country clean so that we keep our people safe. Because most of the sicknesses we suffer from in our country, they are not as major as other countries, especially issues of malaria or mosquito bites and things like that, which is resulting from the dirt, the filth all around the country. So if we want to keep our country clean, if we want to ensure, like when many Liberians always say, oh, look at Kigali, it's a clean city, it's a cleaner city. Those are things we intend to focus on. It's just what we mean. It's looking at ensuring that our country is clean, because you know, sanitation is after tourism. You're not going to bring people to a country where it is filthy, it is smelling, there's feces all over the place. So we have to be able to keep our country clean. And so that is why we're looking at.
Would that include buildings, institutions, and all that?
Oh, yeah. Mr. Sieh, that's what we have the MCC for.
Okay.
For example, the MCC should not just be there to take money from marketeers. The MCC should be engaging national governments on policies, on programs, on areas of focus that we can, both at a national and local level. I strongly believe we need to have a system in place that we can collect our garbage on time. Monrovia is already overpopulated, Mr. Sieh. Imagine what it means when Monrovia is dirty. Imagine what it means when it's filthy. So we need to be able to, and again, Mr. Sieh, the issue of pollution. When we speak of sanitation, it has to also do with pollution. So air quality is important. But in as much as I'm not a pollution or sanitation expert, I'm just speaking to why it was mentioned into the plan. Because again, what does that tie into for us, Mr. Sieh? We strongly believe that the less Liberians we have going to hospital from curable preventive sicknesses, the less money our government will be spending on medicine and supplies.
Thank you. And so I want to know, this sanitation component of AREST is a structure in a way that through sanitation, jobs will be created. That's one component of it. And that through sanitation, will you raise any revenue?
Yeah, Mr. Sieh. Let's look at something.
Okay.
For example, let's assume, Mr. Sieh, right? I told you that if we put a system in place. So let's assume, now you're coming to make it a lot even easier for me. I told you that if we were to invest $30 million from our savings, right? From cutting down the rice inputs, and we took that money and invested in cocoa palm, which is a raw plantation, right? And we want cocoa palm to produce let's say some of the garbage can we have here in America, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we say as a government, the Monrovia City Corporation, because every house has a number, right? We will give every house 2 or 3 of those containers, right?
Right.
In every house, we have a date for every community. Let's say if Monday is going to be for Matadi, Old New Matadi Estate, and maybe Lakpasi, and each of those camp or each of those houses will pay, whether it is weekly or monthly, and there is a cost, Mr. Sieh. Do you know how much can be generated if we just put that simple system in place, where they put their garbage in those cans, and on the day of collection, the trucks are lined up and they collect the garbage from this community, and we have a place for disposal, and we implement that system all across the country, Mr. Sieh? Do you know how much money can be generated for that, for the MCC alone? Mr. Sieh, the problem, there are enormous amount of opportunities that are out there. What needs to happen is we need to tap into them. We need to start something. We need to begin the process of saying, let's see how it works. It might not be best when we start, but Mr. Sieh, you always will make improvement based on as you get along. So there are so many things we can do. So absolutely, yes, we can generate money from that. Absolutely.
So yes, you will generate revenue, and yes, you will be able to.
You will create jobs. Let me say now how we create jobs. If we, let's say we brought in every county, let's say we build a garbage disposal site, and we're going to bring in, let's say for every county, the government brings in 10 to 15 trucks. The drivers that will be brought, that will be hired to drive those trucks, they will be employed. The boys who will work with them, the guys who will be towing the garbage to empty in the truck, those are other sources of employment. And now, Mr. Sieh, you know that once you expand operation, you're going to need other people. You're going to need customer service. You're going to need salespeople. You're going to need cashier, because when people want to make payment, they have to make payment to somebody. So, Mr. Sieh, this thing is tied into job creation. The more you make investments into things that improve the country, Mr. Sieh, yes. Now, you're not going to be able to say we'll create 20,000 jobs. We don't know, depending on certain cities and how much investment we make into those programs. But yes, as long as you hire people, yes, you will.
Let's talk about tourism quickly. Tourism, Josh, you know, is a $1 billion industry now in many countries across the globe. And Liberia is uniquely and historically strategic, because the thing that drives people to a country is the history of that country and the geography, the location, all right, and how the country brands itself and other things that those are the things that drive people, and that's how you create the whole tourism sector. So to that, I ask this question: how will AREST set us into motion on tourism?
So Mr. Sieh, you see, again, we went around and we're back to where we started. So, Mr. Sieh, that is why we went with AREST. We want to first ensure that we produce for our people, we feed our people, we have enough to reduce the prices of rice on the market. Another thing we want to do, we want to make sure that we build roads so that our produce can get from point A to point B. Our people can have access to the country, that we can enhance economic activity. Another thing we want to do is the educational sector. We know that in order for the jobs will be created to be filled by Liberians, we have to invest in educating our people, in training them, in providing them the skills so that they can occupy those jobs. Now we speak of tourism, Mr. Sieh. Yes, you're absolutely correct. I just stated during our conversation about Hapo and the beautiful place in Grand Cayman, Lake Piso, Tala. Robert Sport has one of the, I think, if I'm correct, it's among the top 10 nice beaches for surfing in the world. So again, imagine if the Liberian government was to open up the road to Robertsport. Mr. Sieh, some of these things don't have to only be financed by government. Let me say this to you.
I agree.
It don't have to always be financed by government. We can seek PPE programs, and we can do those things. Okay? We can have private investors. We can also build a platforms where government provide resources that provide loans or funding to Liberians with the expertise, with the desire to invest in the tourism sector. We can back it. For example, Mr. Sieh, you know that all the mortgages in this country are still backed by the U.S. government. Both the Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac loans. Yeah, you might say my loan is a Fannie Mae loan, is a Freddie Mac, but it's backed and guaranteed by the U.S. government. So again, Mr. Sieh, what we can also do, that is why having a responsible government that create the conducive environment comes to play. Having a government that people trust. Liberia is a very beautiful country. If you have a responsible government, there are people around the world, there are other governments, other friendly nations, that a president who is responsible, who has the ability to articulate a clear vision for the country, can go to and negotiate with them and encourage businesses. For example, if we have a President Boakai who has been to the White House before, who has met Joe Biden before, and can come to America and can discuss with the Black chambers of commerce and can be able to engage other Black entrepreneurs in America and encourage them to go to Liberia and invest in the tourism industry, for example. Look, government have tools to its arsenal that we can use. There's something in fiscal policy that speaks to government spending and taxation that influence the economy. So for example, if a company wants to come to build a resort, let's say a 5-star resort in Robertsport, and we can use through our fiscal policy means provide tax incentives and say, listen, we'll reduce our corporate tax rate for anyone who wants to come and invest into Liberia.
Mr. Lobbo,
we'll call it down, or we'll give you tax holiday for 5 years, for 10 years. But those investments, those agreements, they have to be structured in a way that people do not just use the tax incentive and then leave. We have to structure it in a way that those businesses, when they get those tax holiday, they create the jobs in our country.
Mr. Lobbo, so the Unity Party administration that we had, Mr. Boakai was a big part of it.
Private entrepreneurship. Private entrepreneurship, that's it.
And you know, Mr. Lobbo, don't pay attention to focus on the discussion here. Right? Mr. Lobbo, what the question I'm asking you, Unity Party had 12 years. I don't know of any record that talks about how much money Liberia generated during the tourism through the tourism sector in Liberia for the 12 years the Unity Party were in power. Question number one, can Liberians, given that massive failure, trust the Unity Party when it comes to tourism? That is the first question. Hold on, Mr. Lobbo. The second question there is this AREST, the tourism component. I want to know whether it has identified tourism sites in Liberia that it will improve to attract the tourists to Liberia. Has it identified those sites?
Again, Mr. Sieh, you ask some questions some days. You have to understand we are in a political season. You want to create a situation for us where let's say I took Grand Coup, for example, and then someone say, oh, the people only they're going to be focusing on Grand Coup. So let me say this to you, Mr. Sieh.
Josh, I think
Mr. Sieh, you ask the question. When you ask the question, give me the chance to speak, sir.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
You've asked your question.
Go ahead.
Let me just answer. So, Mr. Sieh, I've stated to you and for you on this platform that Liberia does have beautiful sites across the country. I begin by calling out Harper, for example. I've also stated here Tala. I call Robertsport. Bon County, where I come from, Patawi Waterfalls. there are several other places, Mr. Sieh. Again, I will say this to you. For you to sit and say that
and
the
my
unity.
simple question is,
So let me finish, Mr. Sieh. Mr. Sieh, you want to debate me? Debate me. Take a side and debate me. Your job is to ask the question.
And I have the right to do
No,
follow-up.
yeah, but you gotta give me the chance, sir. You can't interrupt me when I'm speaking. Give
and
me
just
the chance
if
when
you
I finish.
only relax to
No,
if you
Mr.
see
Sieh.
me adding something, if I
No,
add
Mr. Sieh, I got the question. You're not adding nothing different. You can't continue to interrupt me consistently. When you ask the question, you don't have a side, right? You don't have a side. Since you don't have a side, it is only you who articulate how massively the UP feel, and you don't have a side. Granted, I understand that. I watched Talking Tuesday. I watched the Hour of Politics. So, Mr. Sieh, no, you can't tell me the question. No, you can't. Your job is you ask me the question and let me answer. Whether my answer meets your expectation or not, that is for the audience. But you can't be the judge. You want to debate. You don't have a side. Then let's take a side. So again, let me answer my question, Mr. Sieh. Whether the answer meets your expectation or not, let me answer. And that's my answer. Please. So let me say this again. We have beautiful sites across the country. And again, I just stated for the records. Our government will engage our partners. We will speak to entrepreneurs. But the fundamental thing that we must first do at home, Mr. Sieh, no one is coming to invest in a country where there's rampant corruption, there's lack of rule of law, where the government is not responsible, the government is not credible, the government is not accountable. So we have a job to do on our hands first as a government before we start talking about all those other things. We have to first demonstrate that when people bring their money and invest it in a bank, we are not going to go borrow from the central bank and make commercial banks to be crippled, and that people can rest assured that if they brought their money to Liberia, their money will be safe, and we're not taking that money for our president to be flying private jets and taking expensive trips and going out for 7-8 weeks. We have to demonstrate that first. Because again, in business, it says the government is responsible to create an enabling environment that attracts foreign direct investments. And that is what we are going to focus on. That is why fiscal discipline is going to be key as part of our administration focus. And that is where we'll start from. If we cut down wasteful spending, Mr. Sieh, and we are fiscally disciplined, and we are setting realistic budget, and we are not overstating our numbers to create excessive waste, we ourselves will begin the process of making those initial investments that will attract other countries. You are absolutely right. There are countries that are making billions and billions of dollars from the tourism sector, and we intend to also tap into that. But we have a job to do, and we must first clean up the dirt in the government. We must first ensure that our government is responsible, that our government can be trusted so that other people will follow. And that is what we have to do first.
I have a few questions here that I have to read to you, Josh. On Saturday, December the 10th, 2022, Liberia tourism sector will come alive as the country hosts LRB Fest, the first annual and national all-inclusive tourism festival, according to Hester Baker, the marketing and communication head of the festival. Is JMB aware of this? Will he be a part? This is a major tourism event.
Mr. Sieh, I will not confirm or deny. I don't know if he got an invitation, but what I can confirm for what I know today is that the former vice president is in Sanikole, Nimba County. He just attended a high school graduation program there while he was out there. When exactly is the program? You know me. If I have to follow up and send you the confirmation, I can do that for you, but I will not speculate on that. But
December 10, 2022.
If December 10, let me say this for the record, I think the former vice president will have some international travels coming up. But again, if he is invited, I think it will be a good thing as a statesman to show up. But you know the CDC, how they operate. They have the history of not always involving other people. So again, we'll look forward to seeing that. But
no, this is not a government program. It's by a group of Liberians.
But then that's good. Hopefully they invite him. If they let them invite him, I think he should go. He should support any Liberian initiative. I think it's a good thing, especially when Liberians are undertaking issues that, especially projects of such a kind for Liberia. I think he should go if he's invited, but I will not confirm or deny on that.
Thank you. Another question I wrote to read for you here is, how does AREST address the issue of rising inflation and negative GDP growth? Zogo crisis, rise in rape.
I mean, I'm more than 3 questions there.
Huh?
That more than 3 questions you're asking.
George, I plan to do this because of time. All right. That's why I wrote this one down for me to read for you. So let me read that again. How does AREST address the issue of rising inflation and negative GDP growth?
You know, Mr. Sieh, to discuss the issue of inflation and negative GDP growth itself, I think we will need some time. I hope we would have started on that. We first have to identify, Mr. Sieh, what causes inflation.
Mm-hmm.
Inflation, the most elementary generic definition. Inflation is a result of excess amount of money in the money supply chasing fewer goods, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, Liberia do not produce anything at home. Now you have excess amount of money in the money supply chasing fewer goods. You know exactly what that means. Mm-hmm. Having said that, but let's look at Liberia. Why has inflation gone up? Mr. Sieh, we know where the problem started from, and that's one thing that needs to be key.
Mm-hmm.
If you record on multiple occasions on several interviews, including on this show, where we hosted Samuel Jackson doing a debate with he and I told him that the missing 16 billion was the beginning of the issue of inflation. Because when the CDC government came to power in 2018, inflation was at 12.4%, according to the Minister of Finance, which we have the dossiers to that. Mr. Sieh, by 2019, inflation was up to 27.5%. Now, then they want to tell us that there were no excess amount of money in money supply. What happened? How did we get excess amount of money in the money supply? Prior to the CDC government coming to power, Mr. Sieh, according to the Central Bank report of 2017 December, there was $19.5 billion Liberian dollars in circulation total. Now, 10.5 billion arrived in Monrovia in November, which was supposed to replace the legacy banknote. Now, what reports have shown to us based on the core report is that the 10.5 billion, Mr. Sieh, that cleared the port the end of February and March, that money today is yet to be accounted for. So again, that money was infused into the economy. Now, what happened? You're not attracting foreign currency. You're not exporting. You don't have the ability to back the Liberian dollar. You don't produce nothing at home. So as a result, the US dollar appreciated more, the Liberian dollar depreciated. Having said that, Mr. Sieh, has been a serious problem.
So how do AREST reverse that trend you were talking about?
The very first thing, Mr. Sieh,
mm-hmm.
AREST in itself is ensuring that we have a central bank that understands monetary policy. That's the first thing.
Okay.
In the World Bank and IMF 2019 recommendation to the Liberian government, mm-hmm. they said the government should hire competent, trained people to initiate and institute comprehensive fiscal and monetary policy reforms. That is something that needs to happen at the central bank. Mm-hmm. That is why Ambassador Boakai's appointee or whoever will be appointed at the central bank will have that responsibility, ensuring that the issue of money supply, Mr. Sieh, like for example, we are now at the point we've printed over 35 billion Liberian dollars. That is why right now we have no control, we have no grip over it. So fiscal discipline is going to be key. But let me say to Mr. Sieh,
quickly
now
Josh.
In agriculture, if we invest in the productive sector, mm-hmm. where at some point in time we can begin to export, we don't always want to rely on this export economy we've had of just the extractive sector of the economy.
Josh.
We now want to invest in the productive sector as well, where we want to be able to produce and we can begin to export at a higher level, because that will also bring in foreign currency that we need. Because one of the problems we are having in our country, if you are importing 87% of everything you consume, Mr. Sieh, you're going to need US dollars to pay for it. So why is US dollar will always be high on the market? The government needs US dollar to pay its employees. Everything you want doing like brother US dollar, we need to pay for our imports that US dollar. So again, the demand will always be high. You want passport US dollar, you want wedding certificate US dollar. The demand for the US dollars are going to be high, and we do not have the ability to attract the amount of foreign currency we need to pay for our imports. So we need to work on those things.
Does AREST address the whole issue of dual currency in Liberia?
You say what?
Does AREST address the issue
of dual currency?
No. Liberia?
No, it does not address nothing about that.
So what's about the Zogo crisis? How does AREST address the Zogo crisis that we have? You know, George and Sarah, you were in Liberia. I think I remember you talking to some of them. You were even helping one of them. Is that correct?
Yes.
All right. So how does AREST address the Zogo crisis that we have?
So Mr. Sieh, the issue of the Zogo crisis in Liberia, there are a couple of factors we first have to understand. I have interacted with several of those young men in the streets. I think you saw a picture of my childhood friend who went to Cottington, and I took a picture with him, Milk. And I will tell you, Mr. Sieh, there has to be an evaluation done on most of those guys. We have to be able to distinguish between those ones who are mentally ill that needs to go to rehab, or those who also, they are not mentally ill, but they are drug addicts. We need to be able to distinguish between those people. There are some young people in Liberia, Mr. Sieh, that are really getting involved and are on the street because, you know what? Peer pressure. They have absolutely nothing to do. Some of them graduated from school. Some of them have gone without jobs. Now they start hanging out with their friends. You know, it just takes one strike to smoke something that is wrong and you are off track. There are some of those guys, Mr. Sieh, that can be rehabilitated, whether it's 6 months, 12 months, or even if it is longer, depending on the assessment that will be done. But I think what we need to do, if we create jobs so that we don't have so many frustrated young people who are sitting in the streets and are less busy, that we can be able to absorb this youthful population of ours, if we can give them something to do. Because one thing I've seen, Mr. Sieh, most of these young men, we call them Zogos. They've shown that they have the will and the desire to do something. Mr. Sieh, you park your car, right? A young man will show up and just wash your car without you telling him. You just wash your car. What does that tell you? That if he has something to do, he will do it. Some of those guys will do it because they are begging. So, Mr. Sieh, another thing that we need to be key about, the issue of the importation of drugs in our country that is destroying our society. It is bad. And the drugs market seems to be booming in Liberia. And that is bad for our society because the government needs to take charge of this matter. We need to ensure that we protect our citizens. We need to make sure that our people are safe, especially our young people. But the issue of Zogo, Mr. Sieh, I strongly believe any smart government, in which I think this government, the Ambassador Boakai's government will do, he has already made that clear that those young men, they are resources that we are not taking advantage of. And let me tell you how, Mr. Sieh. Imagine what it would mean if we were to build a rehabilitation center where we took those young people into those camps, into those rehabilitation camps. And while they are in rehab, we say the first 6 months is the process of detoxing. Another 6 months, we allow them just to get their minds right. Then we provide a training program for them for the following 6 months, where some of them can be masoners.
Mr. Lobbo, if I may here.
They can be construction workers. Those guys can now be used to enhance the government agenda. For example, if we want to embark on low-income housing projects, we can be able to use some of those young men. But we need to train those young men and give them skills.
Mr. Lobbo, if I may, the answers you are providing, are those your own position, or what you're telling me that's the Unity Party, or that's the Boakai position and approach to the Zogo crisis, or your own?
Mr. Sieh, that is Ambassador Boakai has stated that he has talked about rehabilitation. I'm just expanding on what he has said. Okay. I'm just broadening the conversation around the context in which he spoke about it. He said that he said that those young people need to be given opportunity. He said those young people, we need to invest in rehabilitation center. But he also said rehabilitation center that will come with skill training. We don't want people going into rehab and they come up idle-minded with no skill. They need to be given skills.
George, this question is for yourself, and there's a reason why I'm asking this question. And I'll read that. I wrote that for a reason. From leaders like King Momoru in Bopolo to Joao Nimlan from our hometown of Sastan, from political figures or activists like T.J. Arrow Faulkner, Abba Poe, Twanwule, Ellen Johnson Sally, Bako Matthew, Tipote, etc., Martin Colley, Mombido Joa. Which Liberian, Josh, is your hero now, and why?
Mr. Sieh, You know, Mr. Sieh, I have several heroes when it comes to Liberia politics, and I will tell you why. On the presidential level, there are certain presidents I've admired, but I will say this to you: I'm a strong believer, and I have great admiration for President William R. Todd. I do, and he is. If there's anybody that I want to say that if I am able to walk in his shoes, I would love to. And there's a reason why. Mr. Sieh, prior to Tobo being president, many Liberians lives in huts and lives in zinc grounds. It was President Tobo who went to West Point and tears rolled down his eyes. And he said that the condition under which his people live were not conducive. Not only that, on the international front, when I'm less busy, Mr. Sieh, I play his famous address to the U.S. Congress. And when he addressed the suffering of his brothers and sisters during the reign of apartheid in South Africa, I admire President Todd. And President Todd's policy, one that many Liberians have spoken about, whether it was his agriculture agenda. President Todd expanded the road from Totota to Ganta. President Todd, his agenda from mat to mattress. He was a guy, he was progressive.
Thank you.
He had a vision. And that is who I really, really look up to. And I'm a strong admirer of President Todd.
Thank you. And any young person, you are big on young man. When you're doing your show, I can be laughing. I'm one young man. I said, I'm picking that. Any young man or woman in Liberia that you like, okay, this is my own young man or young woman. Do you know of any?
Any what?
Any young person right now in Liberia, whatever profession they're in, who you admire for what they do?
Mr. Sieh, that's a brilliant question.
Maybe you should give it some thought.
Yeah, let me give it some thought.
Yeah, I don't want you to push you to that. And then the other question I want to ask, which will be my final question here, is, you know, this whole politics of everybody saying Joseph Yimam Boakai said they squander opportunities. And when I listened to Joseph Boakai, at one point he said, George, that instead of us focusing on implementation, unquote, he said he noticed a lot of PowerPoint presentation, unquote, Joseph Boakai was saying. The question here is, this is AREST, this is Boakai vision. To what extent things like PowerPoint presentation, you know, will not be a stumbling block to implementing AREST? So how do you avoid those things that led to squandering opportunities from the implementation?
Mr. Sieh, that is why he has promised, he has been very clear, that execution will be key, that he do not believe in just presentation. He's very, very strong about that. He's made that very clear that implementation will be key for him. Listen, let me tell you, Mr. Sieh. You know, sometimes when I speak to the former vice president just one-on-one basis, and he tells me, look, I wish Ambassador Boakai would speak to the audience with the passion that he speaks to me with when it comes to Liberia. You don't understand how much. And let me say this, Mr. Sieh. One thing we intend to do is that you can give PowerPoint presentation, but I think one of the problems we had as the Unity Party government was following through and ensuring that works were concluded based within the time frame stated. And that those, when you see squander opportunities, those were some of the areas I think. Ensuring that people are held to tax, that ensuring that you follow through, that if we said this construction will be completed in 10 months, if we are 7 months in and we are not at 70% nearing completion, there must be a reason why. There must be a report submitted that must be evaluated why we are not there. I think the more of that we get done, the better people will understand the urgency and people will begin to work more and more. Now, let me answer your previous question. You know, let me be honest with you. I sit back and I watch most of the young men in government. There are some who are friends of mine. But I want to say this. I have gained some admiration for this young man from Lagos, Alex Williams. This young man, for the past 1 year plus, has been exposing the massive corruption at Lagos. The young man spoke even before the LACC conducted an investigation. And not only that, his courage. And not only his courage, but indeed you can tell that there are Liberians, there are young professional Liberians that know their jobs and they take their jobs serious. And I think he is everything a professional person should be like. He has demonstrated that. And I think, my admiration for him has grown outside the roof. I appreciate him. Yeah, Alex Williams, I hope there will be courageous other young men that will be like Alex Miller.
And George, I don't want you to get in trouble. A good number of our sisters might be watching because I said young men. Even though I said,
yeah, but you asked me for one.
I want to use. I want
to sister who has come out with corruption.
I want to say,
show me one sister. Okay, show me one sister who has done what he has done. Then we'll have an argument.
George, I said in their era of work, whatever profession.
Oh, okay. For me, Alex Williams. That's what I'm going for.
Okay. So no young Liberian woman comes to mind. Maybe it's in academia that doing something that you actually relate to.
You know, Mr. Sieh,
put some thoughts on.
Before I end the show, I'll think of a name. I have to know what the person is involved in, and then I will talk about it. Let's go.
Okay. All right. Josh, Preston, Lobbo, I want to say thank you so very much for answering my questions. I wish we were not a little. I wish we were not a little combative. We would have gotten a little more detail. But I know the strategy you politicians play. Push by on the media guy, then he goes by, and then you get your way to flow. That was your strategy there. I saw that coming.
No, like your man Jay Rudy. Jay Rudy is like.
Yeah, but George, because of time, Liberians have listened to you explaining the JMB plan. Talk to us. This JMB plan, in your judgment, is it good enough? And will it be what that would make Joseph Yuman Boakai to win? And should Liberian be able to bet on this plan?
Mr. Sieh, you've known me for years now. I tend not to. It is recently that you guys have been referring to me now as vice chair for Operation Unity Party USA Canada. Usually I just go by George Lobbo and the host of the drive. Having said that, let me say this to the Liberian people. I would not have gotten on this train if I didn't believe in Ambassador Boakai, if I didn't trust his judgment, if I didn't think he was the right man for this job, if I didn't think any bit in my mind that he has what it takes to execute as president on day one, I would not be part of this. Just for the records, 12 years Unity Party was in power. George Lobbo never visited Liberia. Even though I hear some people say, I lost my job, the scholarship I had, I want to come back to power. I've never been in power. It's never been my thing. But I will say this to you. I believe in a man who I think is on a mission. I believe in a man who is convicted. I believe in a man who has passion for what he believes in. And his drive is what motivates me. And I want to say to all of you Liberians, you can bet on this plan. If it's fully executed as it's intended to, if we only stay true to the core and hold ourselves accountable, and if Ambassador Boakai sticks to his words, which I know he has the ability of doing, he's a very credible, honest man of integrity. I can say to you, Liberians, within the first year, you will see serious changes. You will feel the impact of a serious-minded president. There will be no more buka dancing around. There will be no more foreign trips because the president can't sit down the president can't work. You will see a president on a mission to improve the lives of our people. And I say to you, this plan has what it takes to move Liberia forward. This plan has what it takes to get us back on track, to take us from in a reverse mode that President Weah put us in and set us on the path of moving forward. We are playing catch up in Africa, and this is why we can't wait anymore. This is why 2023 is crucial. This is why we must not play around, because it is important that the decision we make come 2023 will be important for the future of not just yourself, but your children's future. Given the dish that President we have placed in, I bet on this plan. I believe in this plan. And on the basis of that, Mr. Sieh, Liberians should trust this plan. It will deliver.
That was the voice of George.
Closing or just my statement? You wanted me to close on it?
Go ahead.
You want me to close? That's fine. You want to just speak. So let me close like this. I want to thank Focus on Liberia and Mr. Sieh and Dennis Jai, your CEO, for the opportunity. To my fellow Liberians, it is easy to criticize our plan. It is easy to be condescending towards our plan. But what I will ask as I leave from here today is that, Mr. Sieh, that you continue on this same path. I will look forward for other parties, other political leaders to have their key surrogates or aides come here and articulate their vision and their plan that we've just done today. My fellow Liberians at home and abroad, our country has taken a step back. Today, you know what it is. Many people who were independent 5 years ago are now beggars in their own country. Honor President George Weah, his finance minister, told you that as a result of a system glitch, they have cost our people 3 months' salary only in Liberia. But the system glitch did not stop President Weah from getting his allowances to tour the world for 7 weeks, abandoning the country. President George Weah has shown no willingness, no desire, no determination, no will to fighting corruption. You've heard the stories at Legis. You've heard the stories at Liberia Water and Sewer. Not only that government officials now are lackadaisical when they discuss corruption, they know they have a leader who cares less about fighting corruption, and therefore they all swim in the pool of corruption. We must stop this. We must ensure that we rescue our country. You have an opportunity to do so. You have an opportunity, I repeat, in an honest, dedicated, passionate, visionary, most experienced public servant in the history of our country. His Excellency Ambassador Joseph Numa experienced humble Boakai. He's a man who has been tested and he has passed. He has shown that you can trust him with public resources. And we believe that if we do so, we'll be better. And folks, you are suffering today as a result of the decisions you made in 2017. Elections are not opportunity to acquire new t-shirts. Elections are not opportunity to eat free food and dance around. Elections are periods in your lives that decisions that govern your well-being, that will transform your future, are made. And I hope you've had enough time, because one thing that is constant, you are going to keep hearing surrogates, aides, independents argue that, you know, the oppositions are not united. Can we trust them? That is a strategy. Don't fall for their gimmicks. Don't fall for their rhetorics. Don't fall for their lies. When George Weah was elected, they didn't argue that the opposition had to be united. But yet George Weah was elected. Now it's time to unseat George Weah. They argue that you must not vote because the opposition not together. Don't fall for it. One thing that is united, one thing that is constant is your suffering and your hardship. It don't care which way opposition goes, your hardship remain constant. And therefore, when you go to vote, President Weah have shown that he does not have the ability to take decision. Therefore, all the decisions you expected him to have taken in the past, you now will have the opportunity to say when there was corruption at National Housing Authority, President Weah, did he act? No. When there was corruption at Freeport, did President Weah act? No. When the GACC report showed that the mop-up exercise did not go as it was stated, did President Weah act? No. You now should take the decision for him. You should show him that President Weah, we as Liberians, we can take decision. We have the ability to do so, and you should do that in October of 2023. Let me say thanks to those of you who agree and disagree with me. I want to say I respect your views. You are Liberians. As we move our country forward, it is always important. I don't expect all of you to support Boakai. You can support Commies. You can support the George Weah. You can support Tewan. But we are all Liberians, and therefore, regardless of our disagreements, we are above that. But one thing I can assure all of you, that Joseph Newman Boakai, when elected in October, will be president for all Liberians. He will be president for seditions, for ANC folks, and for even the independent press as well. Thank you, and God bless you.
That was the voice of Unity Party, USA and Canada Vice Chairman for Operation, George Preston Lobbo, a surrogate, a supporter of.
No, man, don't be using the word surrogate, man. I'm an official of a party, man.
I call your title Vice Chairman for Operations. And
yeah, but just leave it there.
2 countries, USA and Canada. That is a big role. But that does not take away your role as a surrogate, as a supporter. It does not. And so, folks, we want to say thanks. The interview was intended for an official from the Unity Party to explain this plan called AREST. According to George, it's still in the works. Sometime in the future, they will bring it. We want to see it. So he has given us the impression that it is written, except that it is not being made known to the public. We hope to see that. So, folks, we want to say thank you for staying with us. We will read all the comments, and not now because of time. My name is Ansony Sieh, and like George said, we are all Liberians, and that song is taking us on right now. Thank you for watching. Bye-bye, folks. I'll see you next time. Bye.
We are Liberia. Liberia is our home. Liberia people. Liberia.